Hamilton.
And you know what? That would even be a debate. Tom, welcome to the
great
Uncle Cleveland
Tom
Sports Show.
You're too kind, but thank you very much.
Tom,
Great to be with all of you.
You know we believe that from the bottoms of our hearts. When I have to be away from an Indians game, Guardians now, and I can't get the radio, I kind of play. I keep it on my phone, and I'll see some of the Gamecast comes over, and I pretend I understand what you're saying, how you would have called that particular play. It's great for me. We got to get into the Guardians, but I've been wanting to ask you this for years. I've known you. I've worked with you for a long time. I've never asked you who was your favorite play-by-play guy growing up, and I'm dying to know that.
You know what, Jay? I think we're all a product of our environment or where we grew up. And, we were dairy farmers in Wisconsin, about half an hour outside of Madison, an hour from Milwaukee. And so back in those days, you listened on a transistor radio literally at nights, and anybody that grew up on a farm knew you didn't have anybody next door to play with. And so the radio was your best friend. And for me, it was Earl Gillespie back in the old Milwaukee Braves days. Of course, I'm dating myself, but they were in Milwaukee when I was just a kid, and so I grew up listening to Earl Gillespie, loving Hank Aaron. He was the guy that all of us wanted to be when you were growing up in Wisconsin, and was lucky enough to meet Hank later on in life, and he was about as good a human being as I've ever come across, and in my mind, still the greatest player in the history of baseball.
Tom, at this point, you've been doing it for so long. What is your prep like for the game? Do you just show up and be like, I know all these players, I know what I'm doing, I'm on it? Or do you go through a specific routine?
There probably are some listeners that think I just show up. And,
Nonsense.
That's the nature of the beast. But no, like today we have an off day in San Diego, so you don't have as much prep work to do as you normally would have, but I probably put in 4 or 5 hours at home every day, whether it's on the internet or whether it's talking to people around the game. And there are various people that when you've been in the game as long as I've been, you can call, whether they're other general managers or scouts or whatnot. And then I think it's most important to get to the ballpark. I'm at the ballpark at a minimum 4.5 to 4 hours before the first pitch. That's when you have a chance to really talk to players, coaches, you run into scouts, a chance maybe to visit with other people on the other team. The thing about baseball, we're lucky in that you've got that access every day. But the closer you get to game time, the more locked in players are too. So the earlier you can get there, the more relaxed they are, and you can get maybe some stories you can use during the course of that broadcast. This year we've had so many of those cases where, excuse me, you wanted to get to the park early because we've had 14 kids make their major league debuts. Mm-hmm. So it's fun to get their stories and who's going to be at the park and how they got told by the manager they were coming up and their journey to get to the big leagues, because for any kid that puts on a baseball uniform, that's like winning the lottery the day you get called up to the major leagues. It's no different than any other sport. I don't care who you are. Just to have been a pro player for 1 minute is quite an accomplishment.
I feel like I want to do this interview with my eyes closed because I don't really, it's like I don't want to see Thomas. I just love hearing his voice because there's something magical as a kid who grew up. I grew up in New York, Tom, and I didn't have cable when I was a kid. I mean, I don't even think there was cable in Brooklyn where I grew up, and I would listen to the Mets on the radio. I listened to the Yankees on the radio. I listened to the Phillies. Harry Callis was my favorite as a kid. I loved listening to him on the Phillies broadcast. I could picture him call. I mean, I could still hear his voice all these years later, and I love it. I love listening to your voice. There's something magical still to this day, even with all the cable and a million ways to watch games. To me, there's still something magical about listening to the radio. Now it's on my phone half the time, but there's still something magical about a hot summer day, maybe drinking a beer and listening to a baseball game. It is special. It reminds me of being a kid and listening to baseball with my dad.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And I think that's what's made our game special as far as radio. And as you were mentioning, Adam, now with the way the world has changed, I mean, we've made the world so much smaller.
Yeah.
where, you're getting letters from people in England because of the Major League Baseball app that they're able to follow their favorite club if they've moved to Europe or whatnot. I think the beauty of our game and the advantage that we have had from a radio standpoint is, look, if you grow up in the Midwest or in the Northeast, like so many of us did, you don't want to spend the next 162 nights inside or days inside watching a game. Nothing against watching a game, because obviously television does a phenomenal job, but it's every day. So not too many people, are going to want to be cooped up after they were cooped up all winter long. And I think we have an advantage that way with our game. When it's played, people want to be out and about, whether they're golfing or fishing or doing whatever with families. I mean, if you have a football game, it's appointment viewing and also listening, but it's once a week. And when you talk about the NBA, especially in the Midwest, I mean, a lot of people are listening to really good people like Tim Alcorn do the Cavs, but you're indoors at night because it's cold out and you're probably more likely to watch the game. So we have an advantage that way, I think, in radio because of the time of the year with a game of baseball.
So Tom, tell me about this. I mean, we're on a magical run here. I know you're around the guys all the time. How excited are they to be in this position? Because I don't think anybody in town thought that we would be sitting where we are at this point in time.
And that includes me. So I mean, if you're being perfectly honest, I thought it would be, and it has been, a growing year. But I didn't see this ball club being in first place on August 22nd. And that's a credit, obviously, to the entire organization, the scouts, the player development people, Chris and Cherney at the top of the food chain on the baseball side of it, but in particular to Tito. We have a manager that every game we play in, and this is not to disparage any other manager, but I think every game that Cleveland plays in, we have the advantage in the dugout. And I just think he's as good a manager as I've ever seen. He's a future Hall of Famer. He creates a culture, and you guys know what that's all about, whether you're former players that I know that are there in your studio or even the rest of us that have been in broadcasting and whatnot, or any walk of life. Culture changes everything. Every successful business has a great culture. And that's been created by Tito and his coaching staff. And, we're here in San Diego, which is the hometown of our catcher, Austin Hedges, who, in asking him about all these rookies coming up, because, it's one thing to have a surprising year, which we're, I think, above where we thought we'd be maybe at this point a year ago. But to do it with 14 different kids making their major league debut, and Hedgie was saying, I know what it was like for me when I was a rookie, and I was not felt welcomed in the clubhouse. There was that old school mentality of, hey, you're the rook. Rookies still need to be seen, not heard. And I think our kids have done a great job of coming up and being seen and not heard. And as Tito has told the young players, guys, the moment the veteran players know your only mission that day is to help the club win, you'll be accepted. Too many times kids come up from the minor leagues. It's a numbers game. You're trying to accumulate numbers when you're in the minors. That's the way you get moved up. You get to the big leagues, and if you're concerned about your numbers and not concerned about winning that game, you won't be accepted. And so Hedgie said, we as veterans have made sure to let them know they're welcome. They can help us win. They do things the right way. There's no reason to go through this hazing, so to speak. And so it's created a great culture in the clubhouse, but that starts with Tito. And guys, I think it's refreshing again, in that it proves you can win in whatever sport it is. Sometimes your talent might not be at the level of the Yankees and with the experience that they have and the amount of money that they're paying. But how many stories have we seen in sports down through the years? If you've got the right culture, the right mindset, everybody's pulling on the rope, all of the trite phrases that we've heard, but you're all pulling in the same direction. That's the beauty of sports. That's why we play the games. Yeah. And I think this has been an incredible year for that. And who knows where this is going to go. But, you've got a chance every day to go to the ballpark now and play a meaningful game, and that's big this time of year.
Tom, I want to ask you about the mid-'90s teams because that's what I grew up on. But before I get to that, we had Chris Antonetti on. I was doing radio last week, and I said, is this team ahead of schedule? And he didn't really want to go there, but obviously they are. I think we can all agree on that. Is there one player, when you mentioned the 14 guys who have made their debut, is there one player or two players that have really surprised you? I look at a guy like Oscar Gonzalez. The scouting report on him was a lot of raw power and a lot of swing and miss. He's hitting 300. And he's just a rookie, but he's hitting 300. And obviously, Quan has been terrific and exceeded expectations. But of the 14, I guess, in particular, is there anyone who's really stood out and emerged to you as showing you something that you didn't realize they had?
Stephen Quan. You mentioned him there, Jason. And really, I could go down the list on pretty much all of them because they've all, for the most part, played a part in winning games. And that's been the amazing thing. So many of these rookies have come up and just exploded initially. Now there's a leveling off, and it's a game of adjustments. And so when the league adjusts, you have to be able to adjust. And if you don't, then obviously you're going to be back in the minor leagues. But I mean, he's not very big for one thing. And, at best, Stephen Quan is 5'8", but he's wiry, strong. He's been a kid that's probably been told his whole life that, make sure you get your education because you're going to need it when your playing days are over here in the next year or so. And he's got a chance now to be, the Rookie of the Year in the American League. He had an incredible start, and he never got caught up in all the publicity he was getting early in April. If you remember, he went over 150 pitches seen without swinging and missing in the major leagues. And then he had a bad month of May, and you were like, uh-oh. But he adjusted. He was able to adjust, and now he's your leadoff hitter. He's turned into potentially a Gold Glove left fielder. He gets big hits late in games. Jason, we saw these kids time and time again in late innings in minor league games the last 2 years. There was never any time you watched Steven and you went, oh, that kid, he's going to be special. You thought, yeah, nice player. But he came from a winning program at Oregon State. He won a national championship. He's just so level-headed, and he's not caught up in anything. He's got a routine, which is so important in baseball. Every day you do it the same way. That's what the great players have done. That's what Hank Aaron did. That's what George Brett and Robin Yount, and you go on and on. Albert Pujols, anybody that's been a great player, they're regimented with that routine that never varies. So he is way better than I envisioned at this point. I'm trying to think now with some of the youngsters because we've had so many.
So many of them, yeah.
Yeah, that, Nolan Jones, now Nolan's back in Columbus, but he gave this club a boost when it needed it at the very most. I'm still a big fan of Will Benson, who's with us now. He's scuffling a little bit, but he's such a great kid. I think that's the thing that has jumped out at me. And then when you meet their parents, you go, oh, I get it. You meet Will Benson's parents, his dad, Ted Benson, played basketball at Purdue with Joe Barry Carroll in the last Purdue team in the Final Four. And, there's something about having a dad that's been there, done that in whatever arena. And I still think Will be a good player. But, I just can't think of anybody that's been more impressive than Stephen Quan. And I mean, I don't know of a guy you'd rather have up at the plate late in the game than him.
Yeah, he's been great in the clutch. Tom, one of the reasons baseball will always be my favorite sport is no matter how much you watch, you still see things that you've never seen before, and you can never really even envision happening. And the other night that happened when the Indians struck out for the third out in the inning, and on the pass ball they get a runner on. Okay, maybe you're going to see a run or two or three. They scored 6 times after striking out 3 times in the inning, and then the inning ended with a 4th strikeout, and the player that struck out had already struck out previously in the inning. That's never happened in Major League Baseball. What's the craziest thing in all the years you've been calling games? And I know that this is off the top of your head, but there's got to be that one thing that you saw that you're like, there's no way that just happened. Does anything come to mind for you?
Well, that's certainly, we're always a prisoner of the moment, as you know, Jay. And obviously, I'd never seen that before because I don't think it's ever happened before
No.
in the history of the game, what they did the other night. They've had so many of those games where they win late and you leave the ballpark going, how the heck did that happen? We shouldn't have won that game.
That Mariners game.
That also, yeah,
Yeah, was it
exactly.
12-2?
But I would go back. I think somebody just mentioned it. I'd go back to 2001. I mean, we're down 14-2 going into the seventh inning against a Seattle Mariners team that won 116 games that year and was a modern day record for most wins in a season. That was Ichiro Suzuki's rookie year, and he was also the most valuable player in the American League. So much so that Lou Piniella, the Seattle Mariner manager, had taken a few players out of the ballgame. But to rally and win down 14-2, we had a ball game back in '95 where David Cohn was at his heyday, and we were down 7-0 to the Blue Jays and David Cohn, and the club won that game. We've had some of those improbables. Heck, we had a game earlier this year with Josh Naylor, who, while he's not a rookie, has been a huge part of this coming back from that what could have been career-ending multiple fractured leg and ankle from a year ago. And he had 8 RBIs from the 8th inning on. I mean, Josh got an RBI double in the 8th inning, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's nice. Then he gets a grand slam to dead center against one of the best closers in the league. Liam Hendricks has had 2 blown saves. That was one of them. He gets a grand slam off Liam Hendricks to tie the game in the 9th inning and wins it in the 11th with a 3-run homer, and then headbutts Tito wearing a batting helmet, which maybe the most stunning thing is that Tito is still with us. That's the beauty of our game. We've had a lot of that. We won a playoff game in 1997 against a much better team, Baltimore, but we won the American League pennant that year. And one of the playoff games, we win the game on a missed suicide squeeze bunt.
Yep.
Omar Vizquel, of all people, missed the suicide squeeze, and the ball went off the catcher's glove, and Marquise Grissom scored the winning run, and we won that game, and that was a big reason why the 97 club went to the World Series. So those are a few off the top of my head, but my first partner when I got to Cleveland in 1990 was the iconic Herb Score, and he had always said, look, you need to realize that the reason every day you come to the ballpark and give it your best effort is, one, that's what you're paid to do. But secondly, he goes, you never know on a given day when you're going to see something in a major league game you've never seen before, nor will you ever see it again. And never have I been given better advice than that.
How about the Rajai Davis home run, Tom?
Well, yeah. I mean, as far as magical moments, Jay, that's number one.
Yeah.
I think it's the greatest moment in the history of that ballpark, because the thing that gets overlooked there is that Game 7, to my way of thinking, to that point had been a letdown. Cubs were just kind of in control from the first inning on, and Corey Kluber and the bullpen, for the most part, they were on fumes, because you had gone that entire October with 3 starting pitchers, and then Trevor Bauer, being the idiot that he was, basically became ineffective after Game 1 that he pitched magnificently in against Boston. People forget he pitched Game 1 in the American League Division Series against Boston, not Corey Kluber. And Bauer flat out dominated Boston. And, who knows how the story ends if he had stayed healthy and not decided to play with his drone. So, then that whole Game 7, it just felt like the club finally had it all caught up to them. And it was kind of a lackluster Game 7 until that 8th inning. And Brandon Guyer had a great at-bat and got an RBI double off of Aroldis Chapman that kind of gets lost, because that gave Rajai Davis a chance. And it's one of the most pulsating at-bats I think we've seen, because Rajai kept fouling off pitch after pitch after pitch. And Aroldis Chapman, it was mano a mano.
Yeah.
And that's what the game came down to. And of all people, for him to hit that two-run home run after that classic at bat, to me was still the greatest moment in that park's history, because then you had the entire plaza area between the Cavs arena and our ballpark packed with people. And to just see people's reactions, whether they were Cub fans going, "Oh my God, it's happened again," or whether it was Indians fans at that time going, this miracle may become a reality. It was that's the best moment I can remember. I had 4 children, and I know how disappointed they were when the club lost. And I said, you know what? I'll take it to my grave, that at bat by Rajay Davis. That's what the game is all about. Those are moments that, as great as every sport is, the one advantage we have is that kind of a moment that keeps building and building and building. And that's what makes baseball special, even though I love all the sports.
Tom, do they win that game if there's no rain delay? And why did they call the rain delay? Because it really wasn't raining.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be argued again long after all of us have passed. That's a great question. Aroldis Chapman is in the dugout crying. He was distraught. He felt like he had cost the Cubs the World Series. I don't know why we ever had the tarp pulled, but as we have seen in Northeast Ohio, good luck trying to predict the weather. And if you don't get the tarp down and it pours, then somebody gets fired. Yeah. Here's the thing, and I know it sounds like sour grapes, and I don't want it to sound like that. Everyone talks about who we were missing pitching-wise. I think that's been well documented. What has never really been talked about is we win that World Series with Michael Brantley. Right. Michael Brantley was hurt. Nobody ever seems to remember that your best player, I don't care how good Frankie is, Michael Brantley was our best player. He was your 3-hole hitter, your left fielder, the most clutch player we had, one of the best leaders we've ever had in that Cleveland clubhouse. And Michael was hurt with that shoulder. And, I don't know how we got to that point, quite frankly, without Michael Brantley, to say nothing else about the pitching. So, but we'll debate the rain and the tarp and whatnot. I also think you have to give the credit to the Cubs. You didn't get a kick in the stomach. You got plastered with a knockout punch when Rajay did what he did. And for them to recover said something about how good that team was too.
Yeah, special.
Hey, Tom, it's McNuggets back in the booth here. Thanks for joining us today. It's a long story. We can tell you next time you come on. But
I'm not asking questions.
Ryan Day kind of coined the term, and it just kind of stuck. But on Friday, we saw McKenzie go out there, pitch 14 strikeouts, maybe his best performance of the season. He's been stellar all year. In the booth, when you're calling a game and a guy's just dialed in and locked in like that, how much fun is it for you to watch him kind of navigate through a lineup knowing his stuff's virtually unhittable?
Yeah, that's a great point. It is, because it's special. You're not always going to have the kind of electric stuff that he had that night. And I think the thing that adds to it, and you always try to maintain your professionalism. It's hard not to root for certain guys that you really think a lot of, and he's one of them. Tristan McKenzie's he's a special young man, and he just gets it, not only from a baseball standpoint, but from off the field. He's involved in the community. He's trying to get more of the inner city kids to have the opportunity to play this great game, because let's face it, it's an expensive game to play now. That's my one concern about our game, is that we've made it tough with travel ball and all of that, and what a bat costs and what it costs to join a travel team, and Tristan's trying to help bridge that gap. He's a really special kid, and you knew it right away when he said the guy he looks up to is CC Sabathia. Well, we haven't had a better guy. CC Sabathia, we've had a lot of players here, but and we've had a number of great guys that can get along with any person in any walk of life. Unlike other sports, We not only have black, white, but we have a huge contingency of Latin American players who are from different countries that sometimes those countries don't like each other. So that can be quite a mix in a clubhouse. And CC Sabathia was one of those guys that, I mean, if you were pink with purple polka dots, it didn't matter with CC Sabathia, the way he could get along with teammates and bring a club together. I see that in Tristan McKenzie. I mean, he's awfully young right now, and you don't need him to do that because we have a number of other people, but he's gaining that kind of stature and the way he goes out and competes. Plus, I mean, you look at the kid and you're like, he can't put on weight, and you would die to know what his secret is because the club has tried everything. But he just has that frame. And again, it's the kind of frame that a lot of people say, well, I don't know if he can hold up. Well, you know what? They've said that about a lot of players, and Tristan McKenzie's proving. I don't think we've even seen the best yet. And again, it's hard for me to stay impartial when it's people like Tristan McKenzie. And the good thing is we've got a lot of kids like that. But that night, to do it against the lineups that he's been doing it against, he made the Yankees look feeble. And so he doesn't just mop up on, the ragamuffins. He's able to compete with all the big boys and dominate.
Tom, one of the many great things about you, and by the way, we had CC Sabathia in studio with us on Friday. It was the first time I'd met him in person. I mean, he was amazing. We loved having him on. Just the best. But one of the things I love about you in particular, beyond your amazing voice and the way you just paint the picture of the game, is that you're not afraid to be critical of the team. Sometimes the home team broadcaster shies away from being critical. I don't like that. I think you want to have a good balance because, the fans know you want them to win, but you got to be critical at times. And I think you do such a great job with that. Is that something when you first started that was a conscious choice, or is it just who you are and that's how you do it?
Well, thanks, Adam. I appreciate the kind words. I mean, I think you're always evolving, and I think if you're not and you're always learning, then I think then you're going to fool yourself, and you'll find that somebody else is in that chair instead of you. I mean, there are plenty of times I've said things too where I go, oh my God, what was I thinking? Or I come home and my wife will say, we have 4 kids that aren't done college yet. So,
hold your tongue.
Yeah, the way I've always tried to look at it, I'm not going to go up there in the booth and say, how could he swing at that pitch? Well, the reason I can say that because I wasn't good enough to play at that level. So how would I know how he can swing at that pitch? That's not. I think if you make a critical point, it's more when a guy makes a mistake or if he's not hustling or whatnot. I don't ever want to criticize a guy for having a bad night. Bad nights happen. That's all. The only time that I'll be, to me, you have to point out when a player makes a mistake.
Yes.
If you don't, then every time you say that was a great play, pretty soon people have lost your credibility. Right. They don't believe in what you're saying because you say, well, every play was a great play. If a guy makes a mistake, he makes a mistake. Yep. You don't dwell on it, but you have to point it out to maintain your credibility. And I've been lucky with the Dolan family and the Jacobs family in that they have always said, look, we're not telling you what to say or what to do. Have there been times I've said stuff I regret? No question. You're talking live for 3 hours. You make mistakes. You have regrets. But you try to make darn sure that you're being fair. And that's why I'm able to walk into that clubhouse every day, and I do every day, and talk to guys, because if you ever did say something that maybe somebody took offense to, you need to be there so that they can talk to you about it. Right. But for the most part, I've never had that issue because I'm not criticizing them in a way that, like, well, I'm just pointing out a fact. I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
If there's something that's factual that you got to point out, you point it out, you move on, you don't dwell on it because, the one thing, and I think it helped having 2 boys, play college ball and play in the minor leagues. No one felt worse than they did when they went 0 for 4 and punched out 3 times. Mm-hmm. So They didn't need some idiot up in the booth pointing out that they, stink. I'm never going to say that. I'm not going to editorialize or do anything like that. I know how hard this game is. I know how hard these guys play and what it means to them. And I think, too, you always have to, like Herbie always used to say, the further you are away from the field, whether it's basketball, football, or baseball, the easier the game looks. And, you don't ever want to become God, judge, and jury because, that people don't want to hear that, and it's not fair.
Tom, do you ever have, mixed emotions about the run that the Indians had in the mid-'90s? And it was such a beloved run, such a huge thing for the city and the sport. But some people tend to always go back to that, may not give the Guardians an opportunity to show what they can do.
Good point.
Is that a catch-22 a little bit?
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point. And sometimes you hear our players, not this group, but we had other groups. Okay, I'll give you a point. You bring up a great point there. And so in 2007, we brought back Kenny Lofton. And if you remember, in 2007, we had a really good ball club and had a 3-1 lead against Boston, and they came roaring back. And everybody knew whoever won that pennant was going to beat up on Colorado and win the World Series. 2 best teams were Colorado and Boston. We brought back Kenny Lofton at the deadline, and there were guys on that team that would say to me, what's the deal? Every time Kenny comes to the plate, he's getting a standing ovation. Now, he had just been with the ball club, but the fans, obviously, and rightfully so, adored Kenny Lofton. I mean, he was one of the key components of those great ball clubs that you talked about. And I would try to tell the guys, I know you don't understand it, but you weren't here. You don't realize how magical that period was. And for some people, even if we win the World Series, there'll be people that still talk about those 90s teams because that was the first time in 40 years Cleveland became relevant in a baseball sense of the word. You all of a sudden had a ballpark that was downtown, that was a gem, that was among the best ballparks in baseball. I always thought those 90s teams stopped a lot of the late night jokes from the guys that, were doing late night shows and whatnot, because we were always being seen in a different light. That ballpark was magnificent. We're always on national TV, always with sellout crowds, always with, one of the most entertaining teams. And that hadn't happened in 40 years. So I kind of equate it a little bit to the Reds. If you talk to Cincinnati Reds people, fans, all they talk about is the big red machine and how great they were. And they were. Look how many of those guys are in the Hall of Fame, back-to-back World Series champions in the 70s. You never hear anybody in Cincinnati talk about the 1990 team, and they won the World Series.
True.
And
Right. Right.
It's amazing to me. It's just, I think that was an era that'll never be repeated. Now, if we win it, I mean, maybe that'll change. I don't know. I just think the city fell in love with those guys. Albert Bell was everybody's bad guy except in Cleveland, It didn't matter. Everybody loved the fact that Cleveland was now the big bad bully kicking sand in your face, not vice versa. So I think maybe until we win a World Series, that's the way it's always going to be. And I wonder if it'll ever change. And I don't know if it has to, because I think all of us would agree that that was an era baseball-wise that'll be hard to replicate, because it was kind of the perfect storm. First time in 40 years you were any good. You had arguably the most entertaining team that I still have ever seen in my 33 years as far as anybody in Major League Baseball. We had Hall of Famers, guys that would be Hall of Famers, that had it not been for off-the-field things, has kept them out of the Hall of Fame. You had a ballpark that was a showplace. You had 5 consecutive years of sellouts, and the Cleveland Browns left town. So to me, it was the perfect storm that'll never be replicated.
Yeah, I think that's all very well said.
I can listen to Tom talk baseball all
Yeah,
day.
you know what? I could listen to Tom read the phone book.
I mean, he's unbelievable.
Tommy, you're the greatest that's ever done it in my mind. I know you know I feel that way.
Thanks.
Thank you so much
buddy.
for giving us
Thanks,
a
Tom.
half hour. Go play Torrey Pines for me, will you?
Yeah.
Go play Torrey Pines and hit him straight.
I can't afford. You know who's on Torrey Pines? Our pitching staff. So
Of course they are.
That's a tough road trip.
I
they're
tried to
on.
get a tea time, and they said, "Tom, who?" And so I could have caddied for the guys, but that's as close. But guys, it was great. I really enjoyed it and loved the show. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you, Tom Hamilton.